Daniel lived in a small, quiet town surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other and life moved at a slow, predictable pace. For as long as he could remember, Daniel had shared this peaceful existence with his mother, Evelyn. She was the center of his world, a warm, loving woman who always seemed to know how to make things better. But there was also something mysterious about her, something Daniel couldn't quite put his finger on. She rarely spoke about their past, especially when it came to his father. Now 28, Daniel worked as a mechanic at a local garage. He wasn't rich, but he was content. Most days, he spent fixing cars, chatting with customers, and coming home to cook dinner for himself and Evelyn. She had grown older, her once vibrant energy fading into frailty. Her health had been declining steadily for the past few years, though neither of them liked to talk about it. Evelyn often joked that she was just getting old, but deep down, Daniel worried. She tired easily, woke slower than before, and sometimes forgot little things like where she left her keys or what day it was. One crisp autumn morning, Daniel woke up early as usual. The air smelled of fallen leaves and wood smoke. He made coffee and brought a cup to Evelyn, who was sitting by the window wrapped in a thick woolen blanket. She smiled weakly when she saw him, but her eyes looked distant, clouded with thoughts Daniel couldn't understand. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, setting the mug down beside her. "I'm fine, dear," she replied softly, though her voice lacked its usual warmth. "Just thinking." "About what?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Oh, nothing important. Just life." Daniel frowned but didn't press further. He kissed her forehead and headed out to work, leaving her gazing out at the golden trees outside their house. Later that afternoon, while Daniel was under the hood of a car, his phone buzzed loudly in his pocket. He wiped his greasy hands on a rag and answered it. It was their neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, sounding panicked. "Daniel, you need to come home right away," she said breathlessly. "It's your mother." His heart sank. "What happened?" She collapsed. "I called an ambulance. They're on their way." Without another word, Daniel dropped everything and raced home. When he arrived, paramedics were already loading Evelyn onto a stretcher. Her face was pale, her lips tinged blue. Seeing her like that made Daniel's chest tighten painfully. He climbed into the ambulance beside her, clutching her hand as they sped toward the hospital. At the emergency room, doctors rushed Evelyn away, leaving Daniel pacing anxiously in the waiting area. Hours passed before a doctor finally emerged, his expression grim. Daniel braced himself for the worst. "Your mother has advanced heart failure," the doctor explained gently. "We've stabilized her for now, but I'm afraid her condition is very serious. We'll do everything we can, but you should prepare yourself." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. Heart failure? How had he not noticed? Guilt gnawed at him as he replayed memories of Evelyn's recent fatigue and forgetfulness. Had he ignored the signs because he didn't want to face the truth? When he finally saw her again, she was lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped rhythmically around her. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard his footsteps. She gave him a faint smile, though it barely reached her eyes. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered hoarsely. "I'm sorry." "For what?" Daniel choked out, taking her hand in his. "You have nothing to be sorry for." Evelyn sighed, her grip tightening slightly. "There are things I should have told you a long time ago, but I was scared." "Mom, don't worry about that now," Daniel said quickly, trying to reassure her. "Just rest. We'll figure everything out later." But Evelyn shook her head faintly. "No, Daniel, you deserve to know." Her voice trailed off, and for a moment, Daniel thought she might drift back to sleep. Then, with surprising clarity, she added, "Your father. He's not who you think he is." Before Daniel could respond, her eyelids drooped shut, and her breathing slowed. Stunned, he stared at her, replaying her words over and over in his mind. What did she mean? Wasn't his father supposed to be dead? And why was she bringing this up now, of all times? As he sat there holding her hand, Daniel felt a chill run through him. For the first time in his life, he realized that the quiet, simple life he'd always known might not be as straightforward as it seemed. Something was lurking beneath the surface, something big, and Daniel wasn't sure he was ready to face it. The hospital room was quiet, save for the steady beeping of Evelyn's heart monitor. Daniel sat by her bedside, his hands gripping hers tightly as if holding on could keep her from slipping away. Her frail body looked even smaller against the white sheets, her breathing shallow but steady. The doctor's words echoed in Daniel's mind. Advanced heart failure, terminal. There was no cure, only time ticking away. Daniel tried to focus on staying calm, but his thoughts kept drifting back to what Evelyn had said earlier. Asterisk your father. He's not who you think he is. Asterisk. Those words gnawed at him, stirring up questions he couldn't answer. Wasn't his father supposed to be dead? Had Evelyn lied to him all these years? And why would she bring this up now, when she was so weak? Hours passed in silence. Nurses came and went, checking Evelyn's vitals, but Daniel barely noticed them. His mind was consumed with memories of his childhood. He remembered asking about his father when he was younger, how Evelyn would always change the subject or give vague answers like, "He's gone, sweetheart." Late into the night, the hospital grew quieter. Most visitors had gone home, and even the staff seemed to move more slowly. Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaustion tugging at his eyelids. Just as he began to doze off, he felt a sudden pressure on his hand. Startled, he looked down to see Evelyn gripping his fingers tightly, her eyes half open. "Mom," he whispered, leaning closer. "Are you awake?" Evelyn blinked slowly, her gaze finding his. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, with great effort, she whispered 5 haunting words. Asterisk, your father isn't dead. Find him. Asterisk. The room seemed to freeze. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at her, stunned. "What are you talking about, Mom?" he asked, his voice shaking. "You told me Dad died when I was little." Evelyn didn't respond immediately. Instead, she closed her eyes again, her grip loosening slightly. For a moment, Daniel thought she might have fallen unconscious, but then she opened her mouth once more. This time, her voice was barely audible, strained with pain and urgency. "I'm sorry. I had to protect you." Before Daniel could press further, her body relaxed, and her breathing slowed. She slipped back into sleep, or perhaps unconsciousness, leaving Daniel alone with the echoes of her cryptic words. The room felt colder than before, despite the warmth of the blankets covering Evelyn. Daniel sat frozen, replaying her message over and over in his mind. Asterisk, your father isn't dead. Find him, asterisk. It didn't make sense. If his father wasn't dead, where had he been all these years? Why hadn't Evelyn told him sooner? And what did she mean by protect him? None of it added up, yet the certainty in her voice suggested she believed every word she'd said. Whatever secrets she'd been keeping, they were big enough to risk revealing them now, knowing she didn't have much time left. As dawn approached, Daniel finally stood up, stretching his stiff limbs. He glanced at Evelyn one last time before stepping out of the room to get some fresh air. Outside, the sky was gray, streaked with hints of pink and orange as the sun began its slow ascent. Daniel leaned against the railing of the hospital balcony, staring out at the horizon. His mind raced with possibilities. Could his father really still be alive? If so, why had Evelyn hidden the truth for so long? Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, something darker, something dangerous. But how could he even begin to look for a man he barely remembered? All he had were fragments of a life he'd never truly known. Lost in thought, Daniel didn't notice the nurse approaching until she gently touched his shoulder. "Mr. Carter," she said softly. "Your mother's awake again. She's asking for you." Daniel nodded, pushing himself away from the railing. As he walked back inside, his stomach churned with unease. Whatever awaited him in that hospital room, he knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. The quiet, predictable life he built was crumbling around him, replaced by a mystery he wasn't sure he was ready to solve. When he returned to Evelyn's bedside, she was lying still, her eyes closed once more. For a moment, Daniel wondered if she dreamed the entire conversation. But then, as if sensing his presence, she stirred slightly and murmured something under her breath. Though he couldn't hear the exact words, the tone was unmistakable, regretful, desperate, and full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Taking a deep breath, Daniel resolved to find answers, no matter how painful they might be. His mother had given him a clue, however vague, and he owed it to her, and to himself, to follow it. Little did he know, those 5 whispered words would set him on a journey far beyond anything he could have imagined. The next morning, Daniel returned home after spending another restless night at the hospital. Evelyn's condition had stabilized slightly, but her cryptic words continued to haunt him. Asterisk, your father isn't dead. Find him. Asterisk. The phrase replayed in his mind like a broken record, gnawing at his thoughts and making it impossible to focus on anything else. Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel decided to search their old house for clues. He started with the attic, a dusty, forgotten space filled with boxes of memories they hadn't touched in years. As he climbed the creaky wooden stairs, the air grew colder, carrying the faint scent of mildew and aged paper. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of unanswered questions was pressing down on him. Upstairs, sunlight filtered through cracks in the boarded-up windows, illuminating floating dust particles. Daniel began rummaging through the boxes one by one, sifting through faded photographs, yellowed letters, and trinkets from his childhood. At first, there was nothing unusual, just remnants of a life that seemed so ordinary compared to the mystery now unfolding before him. But then, tucked away in the corner of an old shoebox, he found something that made his heart skip a beat, a stack of newspaper clippings. They were brittle with age, their edges crumbling as he carefully unfolded them. The headlines screamed accusations about corruption, embezzlement, and betrayal. One name appeared repeatedly across the articles: Victor Langston. Daniel froze. Victor Langston? Could that be his father? He didn't recognize the name, but the face in the grainy black and white photos sent chills down his spine. It was unmistakable: the sharp jawline, the piercing eyes, even the slight curve of the lips when smiling. It was the same man who occasionally appeared in Evelyn's old photo albums, labeled simply as Us. As Daniel read further, the pieces began falling into place. Victor Langston had been involved in a high-profile scandal decades ago, accused of stealing millions from a powerful corporation. According to the articles, he disappeared shortly after the charges were filed, leaving behind no trace. Some speculated he fled the country, others believed he might have been killed by those he betrayed. But what shocked Daniel most was the mention of a syndicate, a shadowy group rumored to control everything from businesses to politics. Victor wasn't just a criminal. He was part of something far bigger and more dangerous. Among the clippings, Daniel also found a letter addressed to Evelyn. His hands trembled as he opened it, revealing neat handwriting that looked hurried yet deliberate. Asterisk, Evelyn, I'm sorry for everything. If you're reading this, it means I've failed to protect you both. Take Daniel and run. Don't trust anyone, not even me. Stay hidden, stay safe. Love always, Victor, asterisk. The letter left Daniel reeling. Failed to protect them? Run from whom? And why did Evelyn never tell him any of this? Anger mixed with sadness as he realized how much she had kept hidden from him. She hadn't just lied about his father being dead. She had shielded him from a world of danger he couldn't yet comprehend. Suddenly, footsteps echoed below, startling Daniel out of his thoughts. He froze, listening intently. Had someone followed him home? After a moment, the sound faded, and he convinced himself it was probably just the house settling. Still, unease prickled at the back of his neck. For the first time, he wondered if dating into the past might put him in harm's way. Despite his growing fear, Daniel knew he couldn't stop now. He packed the clippings, letters, and photos into a bag, determined to piece together the rest of the puzzle. Before heading downstairs, he glanced around the attic one last time. It felt different now, less like a storage space and more like a vault holding secrets too heavy to bear. Back in the living room, Daniel spread everything out on the coffee table, his mind racing. Who could help him make sense of all this? Then it hit him. Margaret. She was Evelyn's oldest friend, someone who had known their family since before Daniel was born. Maybe she could shed light on what really happened. With renewed resolve, Daniel grabbed his jacket and headed out the door. Margaret lived on the outskirts of town, and though it would take some time to reach her, Daniel didn't care. Every second felt precious now, as if the answers were slipping further away with each passing moment. As he drove, one thought dominated his mind. Why had Evelyn gone to such lengths to hide the truth? Whatever it wasn't just about protecting him. It was about survival. And now, whether he liked it or not, Daniel was stepping into a world where lies and danger intertwined, threatening to swallow him whole. Asterisk, asterisk. Daniel arrived at Margaret's house in the late afternoon. The old cottage stood at the edge of town, surrounded by tall pine trees that swayed gently in the breeze. It was a place Daniel remembered visiting as a child, though it had been years since he'd last seen Margaret. She was Evelyn's closest friend, or at least she used to be, and Daniel hoped she might have answers to the questions swirling in his mind. He knocked on the door, and after a moment, it creaked open. Margaret appeared, her silver hair tied back in a loose bun, her face lined with age but still warm and familiar. When she saw Daniel, her eyes widened in surprise. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" she asked. Margaret hesitated, her expression shifting from surprise to unease. She closed the door behind him and gestured for him to sit in the living room. The space was cozy, filled with knickknacks and faded furniture that smelled faintly of lavender. Margaret sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "What do you want to know?" she asked cautiously. Daniel took a deep breath and began explaining everything. Evelyn's cryptic words, the newspaper clippings, the letter from Victor. Margaret listened silently, her face growing paler with each word. By the time he finished, she looked as if she'd seen a ghost. "Margaret, please," Daniel pleaded. "You knew them back then. You must know something about what happened to my father." For a long moment, Margaret didn't speak. She stared at her hands, twisting her fingers nervously. Finally, she sighed deeply, as if resigning herself to a decision she didn't want to make. "Evelyn made me promise never to tell you," she began softly. "She thought she was protecting you." "Protecting me from what?" Daniel interrupted, frustration creeping into his voice. "If there's something I need to know, I deserve to hear it." Margaret hesitated again, then nodded reluctantly. "Your father, Victor, he wasn't just involved in some scandal. He worked for people who weren't afraid to hurt anyone who got in their way. Dangerous people." Daniel leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What kind of people?" "A syndicate," Margaret whispered, glancing toward the window as if expecting someone to be listening. "They controlled everything. Businesses, politicians, even law enforcement. Victor tried to leave. When you cross people like that, they don't let you go easily." "So he faked his death?" Daniel asked, piecing things together. Margaret nodded. "Yes, Evelyn helped him disappear so he could escape, but even then, they weren't safe. The syndicate found out, and Evelyn had to run too. That's why you moved around so much when you were little. She was trying to keep you hidden." Daniel felt sick. All those years of moving, of never staying in one place for too long, it hadn't been because Evelyn wanted a fresh start. It had been fear driving her decisions. "But why didn't you tell me any of this?" Daniel demanded, his voice cracking. "Why lie about him being dead?" "She thought it was the only way to keep you safe," Margaret replied gently. "She believed if you didn't know the truth, you wouldn't be in danger. But now," her voice trailed off and she looked away, guilt written all over her face. "Now what?" Daniel pressed. Before Margaret could answer, a noise outside caught their attention. Both of them turned toward the window. A dark sedan was parked across the street, its engine idling. Inside, a shadowy figure sat motionless, watching the house. Daniel's blood ran cold. "Who is that?" he whispered. Margaret stood abruptly, panic flashing in her eyes. "You need to leave. Now." "What? Why?" Daniel asked, rising to his feet. "They're watching you," Margaret said sharply. "If they think you're looking for Victor, they'll come after you, just like they came after him." Fear gripped Daniel, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I can't just walk away," he said firmly. "I need to find him. I need to know the truth." Margaret grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong for someone her age. "Listen to me, Daniel. If you keep digging, you'll end up dead, or worse. Let this go while you still can." But Daniel shook his head. "I can't," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Margaret sighed, tears welling up in her eyes. She reached into a drawer and pulled out an old photograph, handing it to him. "Take this. It's the last picture Evelyn and Victor took together before everything fell apart. Maybe it'll help you. But promise me one thing. If things get bad, stop. For your mother's sake." Daniel took the photo, his hands trembling. He nodded mutely, then turned and hurried out the door. As he drove away, he glanced in his rearview mirror. The sedan was still there, following him. His heart raced as he realized Margaret was right. The past wasn't just haunting him, it was hunting him. And now, whether he liked it or not, he was caught in a game where the stakes were life and death. The sedan's headlights followed Daniel like a predator stalking its prey. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white as he sped through the winding roads leading out of town. His mind raced with questions. How had they found him so quickly? Who were they, and what did they want? Margaret's warning echoed in his ears. Asterisk, if you keep digging, you'll end up dead, or worse. Asterisk, but it was too late to turn back now. The photograph she had given him burned in his pocket, a tangible link to the truth he desperately sought. As he drove, Daniel decided to head for the one place mentioned in Victor's letter, the cabin near the Canadian border. It was the only clue he had left, and if his father had truly gone into hiding, that remote location seemed like the most logical choice. Still, paranoia gnawed at him. Every car behind him felt suspicious. Every shadow on the road seemed alive. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Hours later, Daniel arrived at the edge of a dense forest. The narrow dirt path leading to the cabin was overgrown with weeds and barely visible in the fading light. He parked his car some distance away, deciding it would be safer to approach on foot. Grabbing a flashlight and the photograph, he stepped into the woods, the crunch of leaves underfoot breaking the eerie silence. The air grew colder as he ventured deeper, the trees forming an impenetrable canopy above him. Shadows danced around him, cast by the flickering beam of his flashlight. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down not just by fear, but also by the enormity of what he might discover. Was Victor still alive? Had he been living here all these years, hiding from the syndicate, or was this just another dead end? Finally, after what felt like hours, the cabin came into view. It was small and weathered, its wooden walls warped with age, the windows were boarded up, and the roof sagged slightly in the middle. It looked abandoned, untouched by human hands for decades. Yet something about it felt ominous, as though it held secrets too heavy to bear. Daniel approached cautiously, shining his flashlight through the cracks in the boards covering the windows. Inside, the furniture was covered in dust, and cobwebs hung like curtains from the ceiling. Despite its disrepair, there were signs of recent activity. A pile of firewood stacked neatly outside, faint tire tracks in the mud nearby. Someone had been here recently. He forced the door open, the hinges creaking loudly in protest. The smell of damp wood and mildew hit him immediately, making him wrinkle his nose. Using his flashlight, he scanned the room, searching for anything useful. In the corner, he noticed a loose floorboard, its edges worn smooth, as if someone had pried it open repeatedly. Kneeling down, Daniel lifted it carefully, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside, he found a small metal safe. His heart raced as he examined it. It was locked, but the combination dial suggested it could be opened without tools. Setting it aside, he continued his search, hoping to find clues that might help him crack the code. On a nearby table, he discovered a map marked with red circles in various locations across the country. Beneath it lay a stack of documents bound together with a rubber band. Flipping through them, Daniel realized they contained detailed plans, financial records, and coded messages, all linked to the syndicate. One document caught his eye, a handwritten note signed by Victor himself. Asterisk, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or close to it. The syndicate will stop at nothing to silence anyone who knows the truth. Protect yourself, son, and remember, you are stronger than they think. Asterisk. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as he read the words. For the first time, he felt a connection to the man he'd never known, a father who had risked everything to shield him from danger. But the moment of clarity was short-lived. Outside, the sound of footsteps crunched against the gravel driveway. Someone, or something, was approaching. Daniel froze, his pulse hammering in his chest. Whoever was out there knew he was here. Quickly, he stuffed the documents and the safe into his backpack and turned off his flashlight, plunging the cabin into darkness. Hiding behind a toppled chair, he waited, holding his breath. The door creaked open slowly, letting in a sliver of moonlight. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the pale glow. They moved silently, scanning the room with a flashlight. Daniel's mind raced. Should he confront them? Run? Before he could decide, the intruder paused, their light landing directly on him. "Who's there?" A gruff voice called out. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he tightened his grip on a piece of broken wood lying beside him, ready to defend himself. Whoever this person was, they weren't leaving without a fight. The beam of the flashlight lingered on Daniel, pinning him in place like a deer caught in headlights. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure the intruder could hear it. The figure stepped closer, their boots crunching softly against the wooden floor. Daniel tightened his grip on the piece of broken wood, his knuckles white from the pressure. He had no idea who this person was or what they wanted, but he wasn't about to let them take him by surprise. "Who's there?" The voice demanded again, sharper this time. It belonged to a man, older, judging by the roughness of his tone, but that was all Daniel could tell. "My father," Daniel replied without hesitation. "Victor Langston. I think you know him." At the mention of Victor's name, the man stiffened visibly. For a moment, he looked like he might bolt, but instead, he sighed heavily and leaned against the wall, his shoulders sagging as if carrying an invisible weight. "So you're Evelyn's boy," he muttered, almost to himself. Then, louder, "You shouldn't be here. This isn't safe." Daniel stood up slowly, keeping the piece of wood close just in case. "Safe or not, I don't have a choice. My mom's dying, and she told me my father's still alive. She said I should find him. If you know anything, you need to tell me." The man hesitated, clearly torn. Finally, he nodded toward the backpack slung over Daniel's shoulder. "What's in there?" "Documents," Daniel said. "Plans, records, messages, all tied to some kind of syndicate. And this." He pulled out the photograph Margaret had given him earlier. "Do you recognize it?" The man took the photo, his hands trembling slightly as he examined it. After a long silence, he let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, I recognize it. That's Victor and Evelyn, right before everything went to hell." "Who are you?" Daniel asked bluntly. "And why are you here?" "My name's Elias," the man replied. "I used to work with your father, back when we thought we were doing something good. Turns out, we were just pawns for people who didn't care about anything except power and money." Elias gestured for Daniel to sit down, and reluctantly, Daniel complied. Sitting across from him, Elias began to speak, his voice low and weary. "Victor tried to leave the syndicate," Elias explained. "He saw how corrupt it was, how many lives they destroyed. But leaving wasn't an option, not for someone like him. They threatened Evelyn, threatened you. So he faked his death, hoping it would buy them freedom. But even that wasn't enough. The syndicate found out, and they came after him anyway." Daniel listened intently, his stomach twisting with every word. "Did they kill him?" Elias shook his head. "Not exactly. Last I heard, he disappeared completely. Some say he's dead. Others think he's hiding somewhere no one can find him. Either way, he's gone. And if you keep poking around, you'll end up the same way." "But why come back now?" Daniel pressed. "Why follow me here?" "Because I saw you digging," Elias admitted. "I've been keeping tabs on this place, making sure nothing gets left behind that could lead back to Victor, or anyone else involved. When I realized you were onto something, I had to check it out. Couldn't risk letting the wrong people get their hands on those documents." Daniel frowned, frustration bubbling inside him. "So what am I supposed to do? Just walk away? Pretend none of this ever happened?" "That's exactly what you're supposed to do," Elias snapped, his patience wearing thin. "Look, kid, I get it. You want answers. You want justice. But trust me, this fight isn't worth it. The syndicate doesn't play fair. They don't stop until everyone connected to them is either dead or under their thumb. Your parents gave up everything to protect you. Don't throw that away because you're curious." For a moment, Daniel didn't respond. He stared at the cracked floorboards, replaying Elias's words in his mind. Everything he'd uncovered pointed to danger. Danger his mother had shielded him from his entire life. But walking away felt impossible. How could he ignore the truth about his father, about the world his family had sacrificed so much to escape? Finally, he looked up, determination burning in his eyes. "I can't just let this go," he said firmly. "If my father's still out there, I owe it to him, and to my mom, to find him, even if it means risking everything." Elias sighed, shaking his head. "You're just like him, you know that? Stubborn as hell." He stood up and glanced toward the door. "Fine, do what you want, but don't say I didn't warn you." With that, Elias turned and walked out of the cabin, disappearing into the night. Daniel sat alone in the dim light, clutching the photograph tightly. He knew Elias was right. The path ahead was dangerous, possibly deadly. But giving up wasn't an option anymore. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the shadows, Daniel was determined to uncover them, even if it meant facing the darkest parts of his family's past. Daniel returned home late that night, his mind heavy with everything he'd learned. The cabin had given him clues, documents, maps, and the photograph, but it hadn't brought him any closer to finding Victor. Worse still, Elias's warning lingered in his thoughts like a shadow he couldn't shake. Asterisk, the syndicate doesn't stop until everyone connected to them is either dead or under their thumb. Asterisk, yet, despite the danger, Daniel felt more determined than ever to uncover the truth. When he walked into the house, the silence was suffocating. Evelyn was still in the hospital, her condition worsening with each passing day. Knowing she might not have much time left weighed heavily on Daniel. He wanted to confront her, to demand answers about why she'd kept such a massive secret from him for so long. But at the same time, he understood her fear. She had spent years protecting him, sacrificing her own peace of mind to ensure his safety. Now, standing in the dimly lit living room, Daniel realized how much pain she must have carried all these years. He decided to visit her one last time before making any decisions. Early the next morning, he drove to the hospital, clutching the photograph and a few key documents he found in the cabin. When he entered Evelyn's room, she was lying motionless, her frail body barely moving beneath the thin hospital blanket. For a moment, Daniel thought she might be asleep, but then her eyes fluttered open, meeting his gaze. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered weakly, her voice barely audible. "You look tired." "I'm fine, Mom," Daniel replied, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "I need to talk to you." Evelyn frowned slightly, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" Daniel hesitated, unsure where to begin. Finally, he pulled out the photograph and held it up for her to see. "Do you remember this?" Evelyn's breath hitched as her eyes fell on the image. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded slowly. "Of course I do," she murmured. "That was the last happy day we had together." "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "Why did you let me believe Dad was dead?" Evelyn closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Because I was scared, Daniel, scared for you. If you knew who your father really was, if you knew what you got mixed up in, you had been in danger too. I couldn't risk losing you." "But keeping it from me didn't protect me," Daniel said softly. "It only made things worse. Don't you see? I deserved to know the truth." Evelyn opened her eyes again, her expression filled with guilt and regret. "I know," she admitted. "And I'm so sorry, but there's something else you need to understand." Her voice trailed off, and she struggled to sit up slightly, wincing in pain. "What is it?" Daniel urged gently. She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "The syndicate, they didn't just threaten your father. They threatened me too. That's why we moved around so much when you were little. And then, when I thought it was finally over, I realized they'd marked me too." She paused, swallowing hard. "Look at my wrist." Confused, Daniel carefully lifted the edge of the blanket covering her arm. There, on the inside of her wrist, was a faint scar, a small circular brand shaped like an insignia. It looked old, faded with time, but unmistakable. "What is this?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking. "It's their mark," Evelyn explained. "They branded me as a warning, to remind me that no matter where I went, they could find me, and if I ever tried to tell anyone the truth, they wouldn't hesitate to hurt you." Daniel stared at the scar, his stomach churning. All these years, he thought Evelyn was simply overprotective or secretive. But now he saw the full extent of the sacrifices she'd made, not just for herself, but for him. She hadn't just hidden the truth. She'd lived in constant fear, carrying the weight of the syndicate's threats alone. "I never wanted this life for you," Evelyn continued, her voice breaking. "But I couldn't leave you unprotected. That's why I helped your father disappear. We both loved you too much to put you in harm's way." Tears streamed down Daniel's face as he listened. He wanted to be angry, to blame her for keeping him in the dark. But instead, all he felt was overwhelming sadness, for her pain, for his father's sacrifice, and for the life they'd lost because of forces beyond their control. As Evelyn drifted back to sleep, Daniel sat quietly by her side, holding her hand. He knew there was no going back now. The past had caught up with him, and whether he liked it or not, he was part of its story. But one thing was certain, he wouldn't let fear dictate his future. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on. For himself, for his parents, and for the truth they had fought so hard to protect. In the days following Evelyn's passing, Daniel felt a strange emptiness settle over him. A house that had once been filled with her warmth now seemed hollow, its walls echoing with memories he wasn't sure he could bear. Her funeral was small and quiet, attended only by close friends and neighbors who barely knew the secrets she had carried. As Daniel stood by her grave, clutching a single white rose, he promised himself one thing: he would honor her memory by uncovering the truth she had sacrificed so much to protect. A few days later, while sorting through Evelyn's belongings, Daniel discovered something unexpected: a padded envelope tucked inside an old shoebox. It bore no return address, but his name was written on it in shaky handwriting. His heart skipped a beat as he opened it carefully. Inside, he found a letter and a photograph. The photo showed him as a baby, cradled in Victor's arms, smiling innocently at the camera. But what caught his attention was the red ink scrawled across the corner of the image, a symbol eerily similar to the insignia branded on Evelyn's wrist. The letter was addressed to him, written in Victor's unmistakable handwriting. Asterisk, dear Daniel. If you're reading this, it means I failed to keep you safe. I want you to know how much I love you, and how deeply sorry I am for leaving. Leaving wasn't easy, but staying would have put your life in danger. The Syndicate doesn't forgive, and they don't forget. They'll stop at nothing to silence anyone who knows their secrets. I tried to leave them behind, but they never let me go. Your mother and I did everything we could to shield you from this darkness. Please understand, we didn't choose this life, we chose you. If there's any way to make things right, it's by living the life we fought to give you. Don't waste it chasing revenge or answers. Be better than us. Love fiercely, live freely, and never let fear control you. With all my heart, Dad. Asterisk. Tears blurred Daniel's vision as he read the words over and over again. For the first time, he truly understood the weight of his parents' sacrifices. Victor hadn't abandoned them, he had given up everything to ensure their survival. And Evelyn had carried the burden of his decision, raising Daniel alone while shielding him from the dangers that lurked in the shadows. But the photograph disturbed him. Why had someone marked it with the Syndicate's insignia? Was it a warning? A message? Or simply proof that even after all these years, they were still watching? As if answering his unspoken question, a knock sounded at the door. Startled, Daniel set the letter aside and went to answer it. Standing on the porch was a man in a dark suit, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," the man said flatly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Daniel tensed, his instincts screaming danger. "Who are you?" "My name isn't important," the man replied. "What matters is why I'm here. You've been digging into things you shouldn't. Stop now, before it's too late." "I can't do that," Daniel said firmly, though his voice trembled slightly. "Not until I know the truth." The man sighed, shaking his head. "You're making a mistake. Your father learned the hard way what happens when you cross the Syndicate. Do you really want to end up like him?" Daniel clenched his fists, anger overriding his fear. What happened to him? Is he alive? The man studied him for a moment, then shrugged nonchalantly. "Does it matter? Even if he is, he's not coming back. He made his choice, just like Evelyn did. Now it's your turn to decide. Walk away, or follow them down the same path." For a long moment, Daniel didn't respond. He thought about everything he'd uncovered, the lies, the sacrifices, the pain. He thought about his mother's scarred wrist and his father's desperate letter. And finally, he realized something. The truth wasn't worth losing himself over. Revenge wouldn't bring them back, and chasing shadows wouldn't undo the past. "No," Daniel said quietly but firmly. "I'm done running. I'm done hiding. Whatever happens next, it's on my terms, not theirs." The man smirked faintly, as if impressed by his resolve. Without another word, he turned and left, disappearing into the night. Alone once more, Daniel sank onto the couch, staring at the letter in his hands. His face was pale, drained of color, as the full weight of the truth settled over him. His parents had loved him enough to risk everything, and now it was his turn to honor that love, not by seeking justice or vengeance, but by living the life they had fought so hard to give him. And so, with tears streaming down his face, Daniel vowed to move forward, not as a victim of the past, but as someone determined to rise above it.